Kill Complacency, a podcast that inspires growth and intentionality and helps you overcome your greatest obstacles.
Hey, do you guys have more time? We're coming up on an hour.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
keep you, going. Marty.
Okay. Because I'm enjoying this. Yeah, and that's what I want to help people do. And like early in my marriage, it's kind of as a testimony of this, earlier in our marriage, we would eat supper. Ginger would make this great meal. And I would hop up and I would go do the dishes, and she would be frustrated because she just wanted to sit and talk. And we read the book, The 5 Love Languages. And like that was similar to this in the sense that we now understood our love language, but also our spouses. And now instead of hopping up after supper and doing acts of service, because that's how I understood love, I could sit and talk to her because hers was quality time, or we could do dishes together. But yeah, that's why I love your book or books like it. Like the more we understand ourselves, the more we'll understand our spouse, and the more we can be secure connectors, because it helps us along the way.
And I think the 5 love languages, what Gary Chapman observed was, groundbreaking for a lot of people. I mean, he's sold so many copies of that, but I think, there's a difference between who we are and how we are. Okay.
Sure.
So there's parts of our personality that is like, if God's stamp on us, if you will. Like if you're born an introvert, you're not going to become an extrovert. Like that part's not going to change about you, right? But what attachment is attachment is about how we've been shaped. It's how we are, not a who we are. And if you think about love languages, they're not actually who we are, they're how we are. Because like you said, why is your love language acts of service as an avoider? Because it's non-vulnerable, because it's performance-based, right? Why would an anxious attachment style love language be quality time or physical touch, right? Why would a pleaser, love language be words of affirmation? Because they're seeking reassurance, right? And so Gary Chapman observed something, and yes, if you speak that love language, yeah, it soothes some of the insecurity on the inside, sure.
The attachments.
But how about you change the insecurity? Change the insecurity and see what happens to your love style, to your love language, right? That's the neuroscience behind this.
That's powerful. Well, and I would say that, yes, like we've been married 23 years, I think. And so we have seen, not that we don't maybe have some foundation to our love languages, but there are times that it's almost like they've changed. And probably to your point, it's because we've grown in different areas, or we're really neglecting other areas. So, yeah,
well, I think you guys I think the goal is to become more and more self-aware, and there's many tools to become more self-aware. But like once you hold the mirror up to your face and I am this way, what do you do with that? So that's why understanding, like my step one was recognizing that my reactivity, like the more I would react, like the longer we're going to be in conflict. And I've labeled it like the conflict resolution interval. So I'm like, okay, if I can just be less reactive, we'll get to resolution sooner. Because, that's really what we want. Like, like life is too short to be, fighting about the small stuff. But,
yeah.
I hear it all the time about, like what we end up, fighting about as couples and in relationships. It's like, what's for dinner? Or, you weren't listening to me, or it's not big stuff, but it's how we choose to communicate. So getting rid of these patterns that are no longer serving ourselves and putting on new patterns that are going to bring comfort and closeness. And that's what God wants us to do. We understood like, okay, we need to forgive because Jesus forgives and everything. But like, how many times did we actually apply it in a way that he wants us? He's ultimately the secure connector.
But to Amy's point here too, we're not saying, just learn how to fix and solve problems. What we're saying is, as you develop a secure attachment, you'll learn how to know one another deeply and learn how to be understood by one another. Be able to, connection happens on an emotional level. That's how connection happens. And so if you become emotionally secure in yourself, then you'll be able to connect emotionally with others. And, as Amy's saying, most people, they're fighting about the dishes. They're fighting about someone being late. They're fighting about somebody not looking at them when they're talking to them, right? And they fight about that. But what they don't realize is attachment wounds drive that cycle, and attachment wounds initiate that cycle. I didn't feel like I was seen or heard growing up. So when you're not looking at me and I'm talking to you, it's triggering a wound that I'm not aware of. And I get really mad about that. Or I was made to wait as a kid. And when you're not ready on time, like, I find it so totally disrespectful. Why can't you just be ready on time, right? They don't realize it's these attachment wounds that drive the bus. Right.
But the beautiful thing about it is you get to see and know a side of your spouse that you would never even tap into. And I mean, not to say that looking back at childhood is pretty, but I would say it's productive, because I know, like, Marc being the youngest of his siblings, like, when I go walking ahead and he has to tie his shoe, like, that perceived abandonment can pop up, but I can relate to that because I have other perceived abandonment issues. And so, like, the more we kind of share and know that about each other, the more, like, we can comfort each other, because like, because what childhood didn't do, like those missed out opportunities on comfort, like, we can do for each other. And so I think that's a great first step for a comfort circle. Don't go with the level 10 issue, vacillator advice here. Go with an opportunity to explore something, like, what's something you missed out on as a child, with comfort, and talk about that. Just like you did with your sister. Like, that is a great first step. And, just to help your audience understand, like, the fear of, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, we all have something wrong with us. And, like, it's this stuff will help us to be better. So if you go and take the quiz on howwelove.com, you might end up high on a vacillator, or you might end up high vacillator pleaser. Like, there's more of an imprint, but don't take it as like 5 diagnoses that you just got and like, oh, the world's terrible. Take it as an opportunity of, I have a lot of things that I can grow. Like, like, because when you're aware about something, you can grow. And that's what it's done for us. Like, it really has helped us. It's helped our kids. Our kids are 20 years old. And when I hear my daughter come home and say, oh, I was ruminating today, and I'm like, she caught herself, like, just being able to say it really helps.
But you do need to have a diagnosis. This is not about there's people who are acutely sensitive to shame, and some of them might be listening to this and like, you're just trying to label me or put me in the box. But that's shame driving the bus here, right? If you there's something wrong, you're sick and you go to the doctor, okay, there's specific symptoms that the doctor is going to figure out, for a diagnosis for you. Because if you don't have a diagnosis, there's no treatment, right? You got to have a diagnosis to get a treatment, right? And so diagnosis is not necessarily a bad thing. But it's not about labeling people and putting them into a box. It's about creating categories of understanding. And we use categories of understanding for everything. If we didn't have categories of understanding for stoplights and traffic signals and things like that, it would be chaos. We have to all have a category of understanding for it, to understand what it means and how it affects us and how we move forward. And so learning about this about yourself gives you that insight, gives you that awareness so that you can change something. You can't change something that you're not aware of. So, and this is where I found myself. I knew that there were things about me that I didn't like. I reacted in certain ways, and I tried to improve. I tried to love better. But I stalled because I didn't realize what the wounds were underneath. And once I became aware of the wounds, right, then I was able to, if Amy walked ahead of me and I was tying my shoe and I was like, what's she doing? Like, why can't she wait? I was able to recognize, like, oh, that's my perceived abandonment. And then I could learn how to self-soothe and I could calm that on the inside. And the more I did that, the wound reduced, the trigger reduced. And then as Amy's saying, the more wounded you are, the more reactive you are, right? So
sure,
once you heal, your reactions reduce, and it helps you then to be able to respond to a situation. Big difference, reactivity versus responsivity.
Yeah, no, that's really good. What attachment style do you think is most misunderstood? And what do you think the real story behind it is?
I think the one that's probably most misunderstood is probably, I think there's 3, really. I mean, I think the one of the vacillator's wounds is being misunderstood because they can seem so volatile. They do a push-pull, I'm mad at you because you didn't do this, and now when you're ready to do this, I don't want you to do it now. So they can be often, by by people who don't really understand, like, oh, you're bipolar. Like, what do you don't even know what you want. Like, you just,
Well,
like,
they would almost appear as an avoider or a controller, wouldn't they?
they can't. Well, all of the attachment styles can be controlling. They can control in different way. I mean, when we're talking about somebody who's a controller or a victim, I'm talking about their attachment style. I mean, anybody can be. If your car gets broken into, you're a victim of car theft, right? You didn't choose it. What we're talking about is an attachment style, the way that you relate to others predominantly. Right. And so, yes, people who are vacillated can be labeled as controlling and manipulative and coercive. But the difference between them and a controller attachment is they want the other person to want to do it. They want to get this idealized connection. Whereas for a controller, it's like they want compliance because they want submissiveness. They want obedience because relationships they view are like this. And when things aren't predictable, I feel unsafe. So I need you to do it this way, regardless of whether you want to do that or not. And so I think the cycles of abuse, the control, and the victim, they're misunderstood because, you know, it's natural, I think, for people to be upset at people who hurt and abuse others. And we do recognize, you know, generally that, you know, abused people often become abusers. Doesn't mean that you will become an abuser, but typically somebody who's abusive has gone through abuse themselves, right? And so, yes, it's okay. You know, it's normal to be upset at somebody for hurting someone else, but learning to recognize there's a wound underneath that. And then for a victim, you know, when you show them the way out and they stay in the cycle of abuse or they get out of one abusive relationship into another abusive relationship, people often give up on them because they're like, I don't get it. I don't know why they're doing it. Or it takes so long to get out. So I think the vacillator, the controller, and the victim are probably the most misunderstood because I think especially in our Western society, you know, trying not to have conflict because avoiders and pleasers they're conflict avoidant. That seems like the preferred way to be. Just be nice to one another. Just don't worry about it. Right. And so that seems to be more understood and more accepted. But as Amy's saying, and as you pointed to before, there's cultural shifts. You know, there's more divorce, there's more broken homes. So we're likely seeing more vacillator attachment styles developed because there's this intermittent connection
stability
being created between a child and a parent.
Interesting.
But I think as you put a secure attachment lens on, like when you start to look for this stuff, you start to understand people more than they might even be aware of. Because I mean, everybody has some sort of attachment injury, and that really gives you a lot more empathy towards people. If you can see, you know, like they probably came from a broken home that, you know, that's probably why they handled it the way that they did. And so like when you start to see people like that, you have more compassion for people and yourself too.
Give the audience some advice on this. What's one sentence someone can say during a conflict that instantly shifts the whole atmosphere?
Well, in my book, so I mentioned to you before about difference between reaction and response, right? There's a reason why we call them first responders, not first reactors, right? A reaction is just kind of a default mechanism of what you've learned to do to keep safe, whereas a response is what's the most adaptive thing to do in this situation. You can't respond and react at the same time. You have to first learn to not react before you can respond. So, you know, I talk about the neuroscience heavily in my book, and I talk about the part of the brain, the amygdala, that gets triggered. And so we need to learn to calm that down. So learning to take space, but not as a way to avoid a conversation. Learning to say something along the lines of, I can see that this is important to you, but I don't think it's productive for us to argue about this. I'm going to take a moment and gather my thoughts, and then I'd like us to come back and see if we can take turns really trying to hear one another out. I think if you learn to say that, it's an act of empowerment. You're not like, yeah, you're crazy and walking away. You're saying, I want to return, I want to resolve this, but you're also creating that space to take a pause so that you can shift, you know, being in that predominant part of your brain that's more reactive to become more responsive so that you can learn to have a productive conversation. And if you are the one who initiates that conversation, if you can learn to be the listener first and recognize like, okay, listening is not agreeing. I'm just hearing the other person out, and I'm trying to understand less about, you know, I want to understand what their thoughts and perspectives are, but predominantly I want to understand their emotional state, because that's the part that I can connect with. I can empathize with someone's feeling without agreeing with their behavior or their thoughts about it. So if you can learn to focus on that part of connection, if someone else then feels listened to and understood, they're more likely to calm down and listen to you back, and you're more likely to get to resolution.
And I think the inward work is you have to learn to listen to yourself, especially as a recovering vacillator. There's a big need to be understood, and there's a lot of rumination going on. So like if you are in an activated state, you can tell when you're angry, that's an indicator your nervous system is in fight or flight. And there's not a lot of logic that comes out of your mouth when you open your mouth in fight or flight, want to be understood. So use your anger as an indicator of like, okay, like this really we would say like, take it off the boil. Like you need to like kind of like
take it off the boil.
Like we joke about these things now, but like it's true. Like when you're that activated, nothing's gonna come good out of it. So you need to press pause, but pressing pause is different than detaching. Like, so, you know, maybe a one-liner, like, hey, I need to take a breather. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling reactive. I need to take a walk. Can we revisit this later? Just maybe some sort of one-liner, because if you throw the whole kitchen sink or you just shake the whole rug out, like you have a lot to clean up. And so I've learned that I will become more understood if I'm calm, and he'll hear me out and I'll hear him out. But we really have to step into that listener speaker comfort circle role and hear each other out. But then I get heard out, he gets heard out, and we made good use of our time versus the opposite.
That's good. And in our marriage, I mean, in the past, we've used the terms processor and reactor. Because as an avoider, I can be the processor, and I just want to go off. I want to fix it all in my head because I'm an avoider. Everything's fine. Come back an hour later, and honestly, we had the conversation. It was in my head, and everything's good. But for my wife, who was the processor, she wants to talk about it right now. Like, let's get it all out. And so yeah, that is something we learned a couple of years ago was just to take a pause. Like, but we were told, like, Marty, you can take a pause, but not more than like 20 minutes. And you have to deal with the conversation, because otherwise Ginger's always on the verge of what got decided. And I think it's fixed because it's fine. So that was that to your point, that's been really helpful for us, is to take that pause, but it's a time limit and it has to be dealt with.
Yeah, and that's the time limit that I often advise people, 20 minutes, because it's enough time to kind of calm down, but not enough to forget about it. Not that most people forget about it, but you can get to a point of like, let's move on now, like enough time has passed. But here's what I will say, because I do want people to understand this, is that we're all processors, okay?
Okay.
Some of us are internal and some of us are external. Okay. You can be any attachment style and be an internal processor. You can be an external processor. But you're right. If you get somebody who's more avoidant and they're an internal processor, then they will go and more likely to deal with it by themselves. If you get a vacillator who's an external processor, they are driven to want to fix it right now, but then they're going to let you have it too. So, so that part is who you are. You can't change if you're an internal processor, you can't change that. If you're a verbal external processor, you can't change that. That's not necessarily indicative of an attachment style, but it can drive reactive cycles.
And that's where you start to spiral.
Exactly. And that's what we're wanting people to understand, especially in how we love. How we love is like, it's a collision of two histories, right? There's a reason why you're reactive, but you can change that together. It's just, it's taken that same amount of time and often less, when with all the disconnection after a conflict happens. You just split it down the middle and you just say, okay, you go first and I will listen to you and I will try and hear and understand you out. And then the other person more likely to calm down and less likely to say hurtful things to try and get your attention because you're listening and you're trying to empathize.
And in the comfort circle, it doesn't necessarily mean we're agreeing on everything, but I can empathize with his emotion. He can empathize with my emotion. And that just, we're at least understood. We might not agree on, what the issue is, but we can connect with the emotion here.
We've even done it with a water bottle where whoever holds the water bottle gets to talk.
There you
And
go.
if you're not holding the water bottle, you got to be quiet.
Well,
Because
and
it's the visual for
yes.
respect.
Some people need that, but ultimately, if you want to interrupt someone when they're talking, it's because you have an impulse area growth, right? Impulse control area growth. And so it is a skill to learn how to not do that. You eventually want to move away from having the water bottle, because sometimes it can be like, well, I get to talk right now, and you have to be quiet, right? That's not what it's about. It's about learning how do we listen to one another in an attuned way. If a visual helps you do that, yes. But if it leads to it's my turn and you get to be quiet, then you may be just fueling a different type of conflict cycle.
And expect to fumble the ball, expect to strike out on the comfort circle. Does that mean you should stop doing it altogether? No, because there's many times we've had to kind of take a time out, like, okay, we need to try starting over again. Like, so it's practice. And whatever you practice, like, you're laying down a new pathway.
And that's where you might need therapy. You might need the help of a therapist if you're really, really struggling.
Yeah. What's one myth about marriage you wish we could erase from culture forever?
Oh, one myth. I think it's probably, we're just kind of designed. What I would say is there's too much of an emphasis, I think, on male-female differences. There are differences between male and female, but oftentimes attachment style differences are assigned as a male-female difference. Well, it's just a man, he's not going to understand, right? And males are socialized in our society and in not many parts of the world to be more avoidant. So that is true. But when we misinterpret that, male and female brains are different in many ways, but as a whole, human brains are designed in predominantly the same way. And so I think there's big myths between male-female differences that are really attachment style differences. And we use that to explain away or justify our attachment styles. And we stay stuck in patterns.
That's good. That makes me think, His Needs, Her Needs, that book. I read that a long time ago. But he talks about pink and blue, just how we, as male and female, we see things a little different.
I've not read it all. I've read some of it. And what I have read about it is about different, maybe biological differences. But I haven't, and especially his chapter on sex and sexual arousal, that's a fantastic chapter. And that really is about biological differences.
Yeah. One thing a line he has in there is, if a man says, I have nothing to wear, versus if a woman says, I have nothing to wear, the man means nothing clean, and the woman means nothing new.
And that's probably true.
Yeah. But it's to your point, like we shouldn't get handicapped on that. We should move on.
But again, in a third world country in Africa, is that true? Is that always true? Probably not. Probably not. We're thinking about it through our cultural lens.
The goal is to create more empathy in the relationship, right? I know, as good of a listener he is with all of, his clients and everything, like, capacity matters too, right? Like, if he's ready to sit down and watch a soccer game, like, I better not have the conversation I want to have at that moment, right? So, like, understanding how your significant other's brain works will help you in this work.
Yes. Okay. Let me ask you this one. If someone feels hopeless right now in their relationship, what's the smallest daily practice that could start turning everything around?
So one growth goal that I think is it's universal across all the attachment styles, and it's fundamental to be able to learn to grow, is to develop something called the observing self, to learn how to self-reflect on what is happening on the inside of me. And I talk about this in my book, that you need this as your foundation, and the observing self asks these 4 questions. One, it's what am I feeling? And you may need a list of emotions to identify what you're feeling. What just happened? Or what is happening around me, for me to feel this way? How am I reacting right now? What am I doing to get my needs met or deal with my needs going unmet? And then where in my history is this familiar? Where did this come from? When you can learn to pause and slow down and start to ask these questions, you build this foundation. You build this huge potential to grow. because you start to link these things together. You start to develop language, and it starts to depersonalize what someone else is doing to you, and you start to slow down your reactions.
Mark, do you know, this is a long shot, maybe. Do you know where in your book that's found? I want to put those up.
I put it in I have it in two different places because it's that important. It's close to the beginning, close to the end.
Okay, I'll look it up.
I can't think of the exact chapter in here.
I feel like
right? I just read the book.
Oh, wow.
It's in it twice.
I
The
know,
beginning to the end.
yeah, it
It's
all goes
definitely
together.
in the final chapter.
Yeah, I feel like I need to put that on a 3x5 card. Those 4 questions, and just try to work on them.
Well, there's questions at the end of each chapter, like reflective questions, and we opened it up and read it with our 20-year-old daughter, and she's like, "Yeah, I want to answer the question." So, like, kids, like, they do want to be heard, and so, like, these are really insightful, like, just kind of family dialogue questions that you can put out there. Like, you don't have to just read this book all to yourself. Like, you can make it dialogue in your family.
But I also, I'll say this too, in also all of the attachment chapters where I explain the attachment styles, I talk about specific common triggers and common reactivity patterns for each attachment style. So you can start to insert into what am I feeling? We'll go through these triggers. How am I reacting? Question number 3. Well, what is the typical reactivity patterns, right? And so there's ways that you can start to fill these in without it feeling like it's this mammoth task. I don't know what I'm feeling, or I don't know how I'm reacting, right? Okay, there's some clues in here in these, and I put them in acronyms to make them easy to remember too.
Yeah, just like you had to study your soul words, like we had to study like our reactive patterns. So he has, an acronym, bad prod and mud wars. So you can figure that out later. But like I had to just like I would study my EKGs in nursing school. Like I need to just study my reactivities. And like when they popped up, like, okay, like what's the remedy for being misunderstood? I have a desire to be understood. How am I going to get there? Not with my old pattern. I'm going to have to invite that conversation. So it seems very simple, but when you apply it, like you're almost writing with your left hand for a minute,
And if you build emotional intelligence, as you build emotional intelligence, you'll figure this stuff out. If I'm explaining to you over and over again, I'm feeling misunderstood. If I'm raising my voice, I'm feeling unheard or not listened to, right? So that's emotional intelligence, is understanding the emotion that's driving the behavior and then what the corresponding need is to be met to soothe and resolve it.
It's really interesting. I have 2 boys, and one is definitely an avoider and one is definitely a vacillator. But how they handle conflict is so different, because my youngest, he's 9. And if there's something that happened, I've never had a child do this so much, but he'll run off and he'll slam the door and just want to be left alone. And we pursue that. My other one, he will get louder and louder until he's comforted. Well, I mean, I can tell him just suck it up, Buttercup, but it doesn't work. That when I acknowledge it, to your point, when I acknowledge it and try to seek to comfort, that's when his mood can switch like that. So it's really interesting for me to observe it in my boys raised in the same home, but they sharp difference in how they respond to conflict.
Well, we all want to be seen, known, and understood. Okay, that's a basic human need. And there may be some people out there who are listening who are avoidance right now thinking, well, I don't care. But let me tell you this, when you were a baby, did you cry? Did you want to be seen? Did you want to be known? Did you want to be understood? Yes, all babies start off the same way, right? If you're not that way now, it's because you learned that I had to be independent or my needs weren't getting met. But at some point in your life, you did want to be seen, known, and understood. So that's my challenge to avoiders. And when somebody can put words to what is happening on the inside of us, when they can reflect that back to us, we start to soothe and calm down, and we feel connected and we feel known. And it's like, this person gets me. I like this person, right? They're helpful for me. They get what is happening on the inside of me.
And think about non-relational comfort. Pacifiers, we scroll on our phones, we eat food, we drink alcohol. might even look more healthy, go to the gym, all of these things. These are all non-relational reliefs.
Mm.
And we need to bring relief and comfort into the relationship, because we do the opposite. We do it with things more than with people, than what we think.
Mm. Yeah, we have our pacifiers. That's good.
Yes, we do.
Leave me alone. Yeah, I think we could talk all day, but I want to
Yeah.
wrap it up with 4 questions. Final 4. What are you guys each doing right now that your future self will thank you for?
Well, and I'm going to sound boring here, but I'm going back to the same thing, because I truly believe that this is the most effective thing that's transformative for me, is earning a secure attachment style. I'm constantly wanting to grow, and I feel privileged that I've been able to write this book, Understanding Your Attachment Style. Again, it's my words, it's my language, but I didn't come up with this stuff. It's not my thing. So I recognize, like, I'm just kind of packaging down stuff that's been there, but there is some of my observations in there, like these acronyms that I've come up with. And so I hope that, that other people will find this helpful and will thank me one day too. And that can be part of my legacy. But my greatest legacy is obviously is me becoming more secure and passing that security on to my kids.
Yeah, we had quite the year last year. I had breast cancer, my first mammogram. Thankfully early detection and doing well, praise the Lord. But like in the midst of that, and Mark had a health issue going on, like Mylan and Kay asked us to take over How We Love. And like, talk about spiritual warfare. Like, the enemy does not want marriages to succeed. And so, like, literally in the midst of like head spinning about everything else, like, we were asked to, they're in their 70s. It's time for them to enjoy their grandkids and enjoy life, enjoy retirement. So we were asked, they prayed for us to take it over, and we accepted. So How We Love has a lot of people to reach. We do small group church studies where people, like people that don't necessarily have, somebody secure to practice this at home. They can go to a small group and they can work on earning their secure attachment. This is a great resource for therapists, because a lot of times people will go to therapy and they'll get CBT, they'll get DBT, but like in couples therapy, like how do you uncover these more vulnerable parts of one another and not just talk about the fight last week? Sure. So we try, so we are very eager to bring this to people that need it, because we do feel this is an opportunity for people to be comforted. So,
and that's kind of the key, right? I mean,
it is. So we feel totally honored
people.
that, like, as vacilators, once again, I said, we're advocates, we're crusaders. Like, we totally believe in this work. It's helped us heal. It's helped us get to relief and to a better, spot in our relationship. And we truly, truly, truly believe that. And so to be, to have the opportunity to share this with other people, we feel truly blessed. Like, God is good.
Yeah, that's so good. Talk to me about, maybe this will be a similar answer, but if you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self something, what would you tell him?
To read How We Love. Although my 20-year-old self, How We Love wasn't written when I was 20. But yeah, if it was written, to understand this stuff. I mean, my daughter, she's 20, and she thinks she wants to be a therapist. Who knows? Things change, but that's what she's gone to school for. And she is so much more emotionally intelligent than I was. And we were talking about something and practicing some soft skills that she's doing in her counseling class, and asking me for feedback, and then told me that she was feeling a little bit, inadequate. And I was like, babe, you are so much smarter than I was. You have so much emotional intelligence. And but at the same time, she's 20, and I expect her to be 20 and think like a 20-year-old, and her brain's not going to fully develop until the mid-20s. But if I had known this stuff before, that would have really, really helped me, and probably would have helped me pick a better partner in my first marriage, pick a better spouse. Although there's no regrets here, because it's worked out as it's worked out. But yes, would have saved me lots of pain.
Mm,
And it's funny how God uses our pain for purpose,
sure.
right? Like, I mean, he was going to school to be a therapist and ended up as a single dad. And then, when we got together, he was, in the corporate world. And then we created an opportunity for him to go back and get his hours. But when he became a therapist, he had a lot of life experience. Blended family, divorce,
Mm,
married to me. No, joking. But like, so that life experience, we can use stuff with it. And especially this stage in life, like we can look back on, like what could we have done differently, but we could also look forward and what can we do differently. And
mm,
that's, like we can use it all. God uses it all.
And I think that's the key, because if people are thinking about this and they're like, yeah, I wish I had it when I was 20. Don't get stuck there. Work
yeah.
on it now. You can
Mhm.
constantly change your relationships no matter what stage of life you're in. Even if
Yeah.
your runway is a lot shorter than someone else's, right? You can still change some of those connections and have an impact on someone else.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about your daughter. My daughter does a lot of self-help books too. And when her and I always trade book ideas. And when I did How We Love, I was like, Kazai, you've got to check this book out. And she goes, yeah, I did that a year ago. I was like, Keziah, like, you got to tell me about these good ones. And she was like, it was okay, but she doesn't need it like I need it, because she's a better lover. She's more secure.
Well, and is
Um,
she married?
She is married.
Okay, she is. Okay.
She got
Because I
married
mean,
young.
yeah, okay, she did. Yeah. Well, because, it is very relevant to married people. So, like as we change, like our, what
Oh
we
yeah.
need changes too.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it was interesting. Just hearing her perspective on it. It wasn't as needed as I needed it.
Well, that's good. I got the ultimate compliment last night because my daughter said to me, Dad, can I get a copy of your book?
Mm,
And I was like, oh yeah, sure.
yeah, sign it.
Yeah.
Hey, what's a favorite book or quote? What's something that has motivated you, or are you gonna go with?
I know, it's so boring, isn't it? I mean, but honestly, to be honest with you, How We Love
Mhm.
changed my life. It changed my life, and I'm hoping that my book, it could be
Yes.
one of those books for someone else. But yeah, really,
Well, I'm sure it will be, Mark. Like it will. It'll have that power.
But the power of it is it's neuroscience, right?
Mhm.
It's research. I didn't come up with this. I'm just
You put it all together, though.
packaging something else, right? But hopefully in a way that is very effective and very accessible. But yeah, I mean I've heard people before talk about books that changed their life, and I haven't
Mhm.
had that one until I read How We Love.
Mm.
But here's a quote. Carl Jung says, until you make the conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Mm.
How many times do we just say, well, that's just how I am?
Mm.
Like, and we just stay just okay. We just stay complacent, right? Like, but
Mhm.
this is an opportunity to grow and, like becoming aware of where reactivity comes from. It didn't start with him. It started way back here, and taking that look back, is going to make this relationship here better. It's a great journey to go on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that quote is in my book. It's right at the beginning of the awareness section.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I wanted to get you guys on, because I feel like your message is so relevant to making our world a better place, with people understanding themselves so they can love better.
Mm-hmm.
So my last question for you is, if this is your final message, what do you want the world to know?
Oh,
That Jesus is Lord.
Mm.
well, yeah, and I think what I would say is there's hope. There's hope.
Yes.
You don't have to. Here's the thing. Don't stay stuck. You don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to remain this way. There's a reason. There's a cause. Okay. Don't live the rest of your life in these dysfunctional patterns. Grow. Your future healed self will thank you for it.
Mm.
The Bible
Mark-
says, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed.
Mm.
And I mean, a lot of times I would go confess, like, worship service, at church, like one-on-one, me and God, but confess your sins to one another. Like, like when we fall short, like, hey, like, can I have a do-over? Like, like I shouldn't have said this, or I'm sorry, I really wasn't listening. Like I'm listening now. Like, like we can confess to one another, and there's a lot that you may be healed is what the Bible says. So like we can help to heal each other in this work.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
How do people find your book? How do they find you, follow you? How do they find this test to take?
Yeah, so they can find us and follow us at howwelove.com. Or if you're looking for us on Facebook or Instagram, it's actually under How We Love Book. On there, we write a weekly newsletter if you want to sign up for the newsletter. We've got all kinds of products, as Amy had mentioned, some on there for individuals, for couples, for parents. We've got bundles on there that bundle certain products together to kind of give people, because there's so much on there, just to say, okay, here's the starting spot for you. And yeah, I got blessed to be able to be picked up by one of the big 5 publishers, Hachette. And so my book is everywhere you buy books: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, Target, Walmart. You can find it. And so here it is, just came out Tuesday, December 2nd, and love to hear people's feedback.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Excited. Well, thank you for having us. It was fun.
I just wanted to thank you guys for listening to the end. In closing, I just wanted to add that if this message resonates with you, if it aligns with your values and something in it today triggered something, then you can also look me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. We are really trying to help people live more intentional lives, to kill the complacency with which they have subscribed to. I know there's many ways which I get sucked in all the time. So if this is beneficial, follow me there.
Yeah.